Hello, welcome to another episode in my World War II Legacies series of stories. My name is Kayleen Reusser, and each week I will present you with a story from one of my 4 volumes in my World War II Legacies series. Today's story is from Book 2, They Did It for Honor, Stories of American World War II Veterans. And today's story is from Bill Sawyer, who served as a medic in the Aleutians. And just as a little private thing to share with you, Bill Sawyer was a very good friend of ours. And my husband took him as my husband was a guardian for him on Honor Flight of Northeast Indiana. So he was a very good friend. The only battle of World War II fought on American soil occurred on the island of Attu, beginning May 30th, 1943, in the Aleutian island chain of the territory of Alaska. Alaska was still a territory until 1959. In June of 1942, Japanese forces had captured the island of Attu. The occupation continued for nearly a year until American forces invaded. The 2-week battle ended when most of the Japanese defenders were killed by Allied forces, sadly at the cost of hundreds of American lives. It was also the only land battle in which Japanese and American forces fought in Arctic conditions. Attu's location was strategic as it provided control of sea lanes across the northern Pacific Ocean. Bill Sawyer of Bluffton, Indiana, served as an Army medic in the Aleutians. After completing basic training at Camp Barkley in Abilene, Texas in 1943, he was assigned to the Medical Corps. At Camp Shenango in Pennsylvania, later called Camp Reynolds, Sawyer received additional medical training before leaving in December 1943 for Fort Lawton in Seattle. There, he and other soldiers boarded a troop ship, destination unknown. When they disembarked, they were at Anchorage, population 10,000. As Alaska was not yet a state, Sawyer and the other troops were considered part of the Foreign Service. Working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. at the hospital at Fort Richardson, Sawyer saw many injured soldiers. Army Air Corps planes flew at night, he said. If the pilot was badly hurt, we administered trauma care, then sent him to a hospital in Seattle. Sawyer and other medics also provided medical care to the Alaska Territorial Guard, otherwise known as Eskimo Scouts. They were a military reserve force comprised of men from various local ethnic groups, said Sawyer. Most were friendly and spoke English. Sometimes injuries were severe. On one occasion, Sawyer opened the door to an ambulance transporting a badly burned soldier. He had to stifle a gag reflex. "There's nothing like the odor of burnt flesh," he said. Off-duty living conditions of medical staff was primitive. "We lived in squadron tents with a pot-belly stove in the middle to provide warmth," said Sawyer. "We wore military winter clothing and long johns to keep warm. When temperatures dipped to 30 below, soldiers didn't spend much time in the showers or latrines. The severe cold made for some quick trips to the john," he said. After a few months, Sawyer and other troops traveled 1,200 miles west to the island of Adak to work in the dispensary. "We were the first group to treat soldiers wounded in the Aleutians," he said. Living conditions were slightly better on Adak than at Fort Richardson. "We lived in heated Quonset huts instead of tents, and the latrine was inside too," he said. Still, lack of natural beauty and the isolation created an emotional tumult for many soldiers. Frigid temperatures and volcanic ash covering the soil prohibited the growth of trees and flowers. Constant darkness in winter caused many of the guys to break down, said Sawyer. To counteract the area's remoteness, the Army provided a theater, pool table, and day room for soldiers to play cards or just visit together. When Sawyer found a dog outside of the barracks, he adopted it and named it Doozy. Doozy followed him everywhere. I think Doozy helped me stay sane, he said. The United Service Organizations, or USO, sent Hollywood stars like Olivia de Havilland and Ingrid Bergman to Adak to entertain troops. They asked each soldier his name and wrote it on photos of themselves that they gave to each of us. Another challenge for the troops was the williwaw. This sudden blast of wind descended from the coastal mountains to the sea, blew up to 150 miles an hour. We tied ropes to hold people and things in place when it came through, said Sawyer. When the war ended in August of 1945, Corporal Sawyer remained in Alaska for a few months before being discharged in December. In 1948, he married Betty Caulfield, and they lived in Bluffton, where they raised 2 sons. In 1953, Sawyer re-enlisted with the Indiana National Guard, serving through 1984 and retiring at the rank of Sergeant First Class. I was glad to have served my country during World War II, he said. I feel honored to have done so. And again, this is a story of Bill Sawyer. This is taken from Book 2 in my World War II Legacies series. My name is Kayleen Reusser, and I appreciate you listening today. I hope that these stories that I bring to you from men and women that I've interviewed will cause your patriotism to grow by leaps and bounds. I believe we live in the greatest country in the world. And thanks to the vets watching for your service. We would not be free without you. Please subscribe and tell someone, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.